Before I call the Home Secretary to make her statement, I must remind the House that the resolution of the House relating to matters of sub judice prohibits any reference to cases in which an individual has been charged. 3 men have been charged with offences under the National Security Act, and the matter is therefore sub judice. However, since this case concerns matters of national importance and it is in the public interest for the House to hear from the Home Secretary, I am granting a limited waiver for the purposes of this statement only to allow discussion on a wider security issues. Members should exercise a high degree of caution in their remarks and take every care to avoid saying anything which could potentially prejudice the criminal trial. I now call the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll make a statement on the charging of the 3 individuals under the National Security Act that took place on the 17th of May and the further action the Government is taking to counter national security threats. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the police, security and intelligence agencies, not just for their work on the vital operations and investigations that are currently underway, but for the dedication that they show each day to defend our national security and keep our countries safe. Their tireless work, often in the shadows, often in secret, often in great personal danger, is indispensable, and I hope the whole House will join me in paying tribute to their service. On Saturday, 3 Iranian nationals were charged with offences under the National Security Act 2023. All 3 have been charged with engaging in conduct likely to assist a foreign intelligence service. Additional charges were brought in relation to engaging in conduct, including surveillance, reconnaissance, open research, with the intentions to commit acts of serious violence against a person in the United Kingdom. The foreign state to which these charges relate is Iran, and these individuals are the first Iranian nationals to be charged under the National Security Act. The criminal and national security investigations in these cases are ongoing. The police and security services have my support in their vital work, and these cases must now also progress through the criminal justice system, which means that until the trial there are limits on what we can discuss so as not to prejudice that process. However, there are a series of grave wider issues where I want to update the House on the stronger action the Government is taking to strengthen our national security, including new powers on state threats, further action on Iran, and strengthening our border security to keep the public safe. This is the first time that there have been charges under the National Security Act linked to Iran, although the House will be aware that it comes against a backdrop of rising numbers of Iran-linked operations on UK soil, where there have been repeated warnings by ministers, the police and our security and intelligence agencies. The Director General of MI5 said in October last year that the police and MI5 had responded to 20 Iran-backed plots presenting potentially lethal threats. So let me be clear. We will not tolerate growing state-backed threats on UK soil. The Iranian regime poses an unacceptable threat to our domestic security, which cannot continue. Following this charging decision, I can confirm the Iranian ambassador has been summoned, and my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, is raising with the Iranian Foreign Minister in the strongest terms that the UK will not accept any Iranian state threat activity in the UK. As the Security Minister set out in March, we have placed the whole of the Iranian state on the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, which is due to come into effect on the 1st of July. The Government has also introduced sanctions as part of efforts to systematically dismantle criminal networks and enablers that Iran uses to carry out its work, including the Foxtrot network, sanctioned last month. And international cooperation is critical in challenging Iranian transnational threats. That is why we are convening ministerial counterparts from allied nations facing similar threats to discuss coordinated action. But we need to go further in strengthening our powers to address national security threats. Security Minister and I both warned of the increasing complexity of the threats we face. Threats from extremist and terrorist groups and individuals, including Islamist extremism and far-right extremism, continue, and vigilance and action against those remains crucial. But malign activities against us by or on behalf of foreign states have grown, and the threats we face have become more complex and intertwined. MI5 state threats investigations have increased by nearly 50% in a year. Policing investigations into state threats led by counter-terrorism policing are up fivefold since 2018. And as well as growing, those threats are becoming more interconnected, and the old boundaries between state threats, terrorists and organised criminals are being eroded. We have seen malign foreign state organisations seek to exploit any vulnerability, from criminal networks to our cybersecurity to our borders, to do us harm. In our manifesto, we committed to stronger action on state-based security threats, and before entering government, the Foreign Secretary and I set out plans for the establishment of a joint unit to pursue and coordinate action. I can announce that the new State Threats Joint Unit is in place, with staff from across Whitehall driving a broader approach across government, building new partnerships with industry and academia. Last week, the Security Minister set out the conclusions of a review by the Defending Democracy Task Force into transnational repression, where foreign states attempt the intimidation, surveillance and harassment of UK-based individuals, including stronger support for those who are being targeted. This is criminal activity and will be treated as such, because everyone in this country should be able to go about their daily lives freely and without fear. We have, of course, supported the National Security Act, rightly brought in by the previous government, but we need to go further. That is why I commissioned Jonathan Hall, KC, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, to examine further gaps in the national security legislation where counter-terrorism powers could be emulated, and particularly looking at prescribing powers, where I have long raised concern that it was too difficult to apply existing powers for state and state-backed bodies. Today, Mr Hall has published his review, and I'd like to thank him for working so swiftly and comprehensively. He has concluded there are gaps in a series of areas, including on prescribing legislation, where he identifies a series of legal difficulties in using powers that were designed to deal with terrorist groups for state and state-backed organisations, such as the IRGC. I can tell the House we're committed to taking forward Mr Hall's recommendations, and we will draw up new powers modelled on counter-terrorism powers in a series of areas to tackle these state threats. And crucially, I can tell the House we will create a new power of prescription to cover state threats, a power that is stronger than current National Security Act powers in allowing us to restrict the activity and operations of foreign state-backed organisations in the UK, including new criminal offences for individuals who invite support for or promote the group in question, and we will not hesitate to use it against organisations that pose a threat to UK residents, because we will not stand for foreign state organisations seeking to escalate threats on UK soil. Mr Speaker, as confirmed at the weekend, the 3 individuals who have been charged came to the UK between 2016 and 2022 by lorry and small boat. And this government has made clear border security is national security. That is why we're introducing new counter-terrorism powers at the border. But let me also be clear that our border security needs to be strengthened. Organised crime, malign state actors and extremists can all exploit any vulnerabilities. So the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill is introducing a wide range of counter-terrorism-style powers to pursue organised immigration crime and strengthen border investigations. We've introduced the Border Security Command, which is drawing together security operations around our border, which have not been taken seriously enough before, modelled on the approach successive governments have taken to counter-terrorism. As part of our existing CT capabilities, security, identity and criminal record checks are carried out on everyone who applies for a visa through our immigration system, on identified clandestine entries and on those who arrive by small boat, so that immigration and counter-terrorism powers can then be used to address threats, including refusals, restrictions, tagging, heightened monitoring and immigration bail. But I have instructed officials to review those capabilities against the state threats as well as terrorism-related risks we face, so we can strengthen our security response alongside the new counter-terrorism-style border powers that we are introducing. And we are also already reviewing our current response to criminality or threats in the asylum system, including the potential for greater use of a range of techniques and technology, and as well as the existing ability to revoke or refuse asylum. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in the face of this increasing range of hybrid threats to our national security, the Prime Minister has committed to publish a new national security strategy. That strategy is in development and will set out not just how our world-leading police and security and intelligence agencies, but also how the whole of government and society, including businesses and communities, need to respond to these changing and complex threats. National security is the first duty of government. It is the foundation of our plan for change. The threats we face are more intertwined than ever, and our response needs to adapt. So together with our international allies, we need to face down the security threats and strengthen the powers and capabilities of the police and security services who work around the clock to investigate and disrupt those who mean us harm. Our agencies have the wholehearted support of this government because, Mr. Speaker, in a volatile and uncertain world, their efforts could not matter more. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Chris Philp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. I join the Home Secretary in paying tribute to counter-terrorism policing and the security services for the work they do daily to keep us safe. And let me straight away put on record that we on this side of the House support the government's plans to place Iran into the enhanced tier of the FIRS regime, and we will also be supporting moves they wish to make to increase the powers around prescription and any other powers that are necessary to keep us safe. We will support those measures. The whole House should be in no doubt about the malign influence Iran spreads around the world. It is responsible for supporting Hamas, who perpetrated the sickening massacre on October the 7th, 2023. Iran takes Western hostages, including, of course, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, held in squalid conditions for years. Iran supports the Houthis, who have attacked and tried to sink civilian merchant shipping in the Red Sea as part of their war against the Saudi-backed, internationally recognised government. In Ukraine, we see Iranian drones and military equipment being used by Putin to murder Ukrainians and further Russia's illegal invasion. And, of course, Iran threatens to acquire a nuclear weapon. Iran also persecutes its own people. Women are abused, imprisoned, and in some cases even killed for not adhering to the behaviour demanded by the Ayatollahs. 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was arrested and then killed by the Iranian religious police simply for wearing what she wanted. I'm sure every single member of this House will condemn that atrocity. People who are gay in Iran are persecuted and sometimes killed, and those who oppose the Iranian regime are brutally oppressed and often murdered. So we should be in no doubt about the threat the Iranian regime poses to its own people and to international peace. But the tentacles of the Iranian state now stretch onto our very own soil here in the United Kingdom. Iran International TV, an independent TV channel, had to temporarily locate to the US not long ago because its premises and people here were threatened by Iranian agents. Iranian dissidents on UK soil are threatened and harassed. And as the Home Secretary has set out, just 2 weeks ago, 8 Iranian nationals were arrested planning attacks on UK soil. Now, in opposition, the Home Secretary said that she would proscribe the IRGC. She said so a number of times, including from this very dispatch box on the 15th of April last year. The Home Secretary has now been in office for nearly a year. So my first question is this: why has she not yet done what she said she would do by prescribing the IRGC? The Home Secretary has said the Iranian ambassador has been summoned. Mr. Speaker, that is not an adequate response. Why have Iranian diplomats, including any suspected of supporting espionage activity, not been expelled? And what further steps can be taken to develop international sanctions against the Iranian regime? Now, Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary confirmed that the 3 individuals charged over the weekend entered the UK illegally, including by small boat. As recently as March of this year, just a few weeks ago, I think it was on March the 6th, extremist Abu Wadi entered the UK by small boat. He had previously been pictured on social media wielding an AK-47, throwing pipe bombs and calling for the slaughter of Jews. This is the kind of illegal immigrant who is able to enter the country by small boat. Now, the Home Secretary talks about her new bill, which we debated a week ago today, but the truth is it won't make very much difference. Confiscating mobile phones from illegal immigrants and slightly enhanced powers to monitor communications will not stop the crossings. The Border Security Commander has no actual powers other than to publish an annual report and set some strategic objectives. I don't think people smugglers are going to worry too much about that. What will stop the crossings is a proper deterrent, so all those who arrive, not some, all those who arrive are removed. Then they will not bother to attempt the crossing in the first place. This deterrent approach worked in Australia about 10 years ago. So the Home Secretary must by now be regretting cancelling the Rwanda deterrent before it even started. Crossings since she became Home Secretary are up by 30% year on year, and 2025 so far has been the worst in history. Does she finally agree it is time to follow other countries and establish a proper removals deterrent applying to all those who arrive illegally by small boat? It's time to bring back Rwanda. In their first 6 months in office, the government have not returned a single Iranian to Iran, not one, including Iranian criminals. Does the Home Secretary agree it is now time to repeal the Human Rights Act for immigration matters so criminals and other dangerous people can be more easily removed from the UK and cannot any longer persuade UK judges to allow them to stay here on ever more tenuous human rights grounds? The only way to protect our borders and ensure security is to remove all illegal immigrants as soon as they arrive, and I hope she urgently adopts that policy.
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would just say to the Shadow Home Secretary, he was an immigration minister when the number of small boat crossings soared, when net migration soared. On his watch, controls were reduced. Under his party, we saw returns plummet. This government is clear that the rules need to be respected and enforced, and that is why this government is introducing counter-terrorism-style powers to strengthen our border security, something that his party shockingly has repeatedly voted against. He refers still to his Rwanda scheme that cost £700 million and sent 4 volunteers, just 4 volunteers in the 2 years that it was operational, sent 4 volunteers to Rwanda. And frankly, when it comes to our national security, border security is a part of our national security. And I'm sorry that he is not sufficiently taking seriously the national security threats that we face. I supported the work that his government did on the bringing in the National Security Act. But as he will know, I repeatedly warned that the powers were not strong enough to be able to use legislation designed for terrorism to be able to prescribe state-backed organisations. We did repeatedly call on his government, if they were not able to prescribe the IRGC, we called on them to strengthen and amend the powers to be able to do so under national security provisions. In fact, we even put forward an amendment to the National Security Act in the last Parliament, and his party voted against it. So I am glad that he now says he will support our measures to strengthen our national security and to bring forward stronger prescribing powers so that they can be used against all kinds of state-backed organisations or state organisations that might attempt to do us harm. because our national security is the first duty of any government, and that is why this government will continue to take ever stronger action to pursue issues around criminality, issues around extremist or terrorist threats, and issues around border threats and issues around national security threats. That is how we keep our communities safe.
Sally James.
Mr. Speaker, given the wide range of threats that we face from hostile state actors, it is more important than ever that we protect ourselves from state-backed cyber attacks and similar things. So can the Home Secretary update us on what is being done to increase the nation's resilience and countermeasures against such attacks?
Home Secretary.
My honourable friend's right, because there are the complex national security threats we face take different forms now and are very increasingly intertwined, and cyber threats and the use of technology is increasingly a part of those threats. It will be a central part of the new national security strategy that the Prime Minister has announced and that is being developed at the moment, so we recognise the interplay between these different threats.
Liberal Democrat, spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. The Liberal Democrats remain extremely grateful to all those extraordinary people from our police, intelligence and security services who continue to put themselves at risk to keep our country safe. We support the action taken by the government so far and stand ready to support further robust sanctions and other actions against cowardly regimes who seek to destabilise our and other Western democracies. We last discussed the threat posed by the Iranian regime in this chamber a couple of weeks ago, and in response to questions regarding the prescribing of the IRGC, the Security Minister referred to the work being undertaken by Jonathan Hall KC in reviewing the legislation we have in place, and it's good to hear this review has been published today. The Home Secretary mentions planned changes to be made and additional powers to be brought in to respond to the legal difficulties in using powers that were designed to deal with terrorist groups for state and state-backed organisations such as the IRGC. Could she confirm that these new planned powers will finally enable the IRGC to be prescribed? And I'd be very grateful if the Home Secretary could update the House on what timetable she foresees in bringing forward these changes and, given the difficulties with previous counter-terror laws, will any of these changes be subject to the appropriate pre-legislative scrutiny? Madam Deputy Speaker, our democracy has faced and continues to face systematic threats from hostile foreign states, not just from Iran, but from China and Russia as well. Now that our police and security services have had chance to use the provisions within the National Security Act, could the Home Secretary update the House on any further gaps they found during their work? Madam Deputy Speaker, we know we live in a perilous world with war on our continent, and we Liberal Democrats welcome the increase in defence spending. However, the decision to take this money from the ODA budget will leave a vacuum in some of the most vulnerable places. We know that China and Russia are seeking to fill that void, and Iran will undoubtedly try to do the same. So what assessment has the government made of malign actors using their soft power to influence events overseas and the resulting threats to our national security?
I thank the honourable member for her comments and also support for the police and intelligence and security agencies. She specifically asks about the IRGC. Jonathan Hall's report specifically says that the existing legal framework has significant challenges when it comes to trying to take restriction action or banning action against the state-backed and state organisations, and that there are legal challenges with doing that, and that is exactly why, and he particularly refers to the IRGC in that context, that is why he has set out the need for those new powers to be brought in, and that is what we are committed to do. Obviously, that process would need to be followed, but I can simply say that I continue to be concerned about the IRGC, and we will need to pursue that process by bringing in the new legislation. She's is also right to highlight threats from Russia and also the different kinds of threats and challenges from China as well. The Jonathan Hall report does also identify other areas where he thinks that powers could be strengthened, including around stop and search, including around cordons, including around post-charge questioning in specific circumstances. We will be looking at the detail in order to take forward all of the recommendations and the issues that are raised.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The charging of Iranian nationals raises alarming questions about the extent of Iranian state activity in the UK. And we know that Tehran uses the IRGC to push its influence around the world, including supporting attacks against Jewish people and Israelis around the world. What assessment has the government made of the threat posed to the British Jewish community by Iranian operatives? And what steps are being taken to protect the community and eliminate those threats?
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise the issues around the importance of security for our Jewish communities, which should never be compromised, either domestically or by any kind of foreign state influence or activity. It's why we work very closely with the CST, the Community Security Trust, on a range of issues around support for and protection for the Jewish communities across the UK, and why we also take immensely seriously any malign Iranian influences that are targeted towards Jewish communities as well.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary rightly says that the threats from hostile states are complex and intertwined. Can she therefore update the House on what further steps the government is taking to protect critical national infrastructure, particularly from cyber attacks? Moreover, our security services commit vast amounts of expertise in our protection. Their successes have to be hidden, but their failures are often picked over. The one thing they really do need is additional resources. Can I urge the Home Secretary to make the case vigorously for them during the forthcoming spending review? That's the least they deserve from this House.
I thank the honourable member for his question. I know that this is an issue he took immensely seriously when he was in government, including the issues around critical national infrastructure. I agree with him with the importance of that and the implications in terms of cyber attacks. And I know he will also agree that the critical national infrastructure we have is actually changing. What is now critical is different from what might have been the critical national infrastructure even 10 years ago, let alone 20 or 30 years ago. And so therefore we need to have the processes to be able to adapt swiftly. And that will be considered as part of the National Security Review. He can be assured that I will strongly always argue for support for our intelligence and security agencies.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd very much like to thank the Home Secretary for her statement today, particularly the steps being taken to prescribe the IRGC and the outcome of the Jonathan Hall review. It's very sad that the previous Conservative government failed to do so in 14 years. Whilst we wait for that legislation to come forward, will the Home Secretary reassure the House and reaffirm to the House that anyone in the UK failing to declare a relationship with the Iranian regime is committing a criminal offence?
Well, my honourable friend is right. That's exactly the reason why we have put the IRGC as one of the organisations put onto the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, and is also alongside the whole of the Iranian state. That means we do expect people to abide by that law, and there are criminal offences if they don't.
Sir John Whittingdale.
As the Home Secretary may be aware, I visited Iran International just a few weeks ago, during which they expressed their appreciation for the fantastic support that they have received from the Metropolitan Police and the security services. If she hasn't already done so, will she, or indeed the Security Minister, visit Iran International in order to send the message that the threats to their journalists and to those of the BBC Persian service are utterly unacceptable, as are threats made to their families based in Iran?
I thank the honourable member for his important question. Threats to Iran International, to its journalists, to family members, are disgraceful and completely unacceptable. He's right to commend the work of the CT Police, the security services in addressing these issues. We take the safety of anyone on UK soil immensely seriously, and no threat to the safety of any individual, and certainly any organisation and any journalist will ever be acceptable in the UK.
Mike Tapp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Home Secretary for this important statement, and to the security services, the finest in the world, for keeping us safe. It's important, Home Secretary, that we have the tools to assess the threat or potential threat posed by those who arrive through irregular means, such as small boats. Can the Home Secretary update the House on any progress made with intelligence sharing with our international partners?
It's an important issue that my honourable friend raises, because in order to address these transnational, international kind of threats, networks and challenges, whatever form they take, whatever route they take, it's immensely important that we strengthen cooperation and work with our international allies. We are already working to strengthen that international cooperation, to strengthen information sharing, but also we are looking further at what checks we can do here in the UK and what security assessments we can do here too.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the British people will be appalled to learn that Iranian nationals who've come across the English Channel have been charged with terror offences. And I think also they'll be very concerned, Home Secretary, that, the Home Secretary, when in opposition, talked about prescribing the IRGC, but now we've got Jonathan Hall KC sort of recommending a delay in prescribing the IRGC. Surely the right thing to do, Home Secretary, is prescribe them now, and if any more powers are required, introduce that through emergency legislation, but don't kick the can down the road. Yeah.
Well, border security is national security. That is the approach that this government is taking, and we will continue to strengthen border security, including introducing counter-terrorism powers. I also have repeatedly called on the government to strengthen the legislation. When we were in opposition, called on the previous government to strengthen the legislation in order to be able to take much stronger action on state-backed organisations like the IRGC. The Jonathan Hall report that is out today identifies the legal difficulties and problems in using legislation that was designed for terrorism to apply to state-backed threats. It's important that the legislation, any legislation we apply, is actually effective and doesn't unravel. That's why we put forward, some years ago, in 2023, the Labour Party put forward proposals to strengthen the legislation, to bring in these new, stronger powers that we are now talking about today, in order to be able to use those against organisations that are state-backed, such in the way that the IRGC is. It's because we believe that national security is so important that we are prepared to take the action needed to make sure that the government, the police, the security agencies have the powers they need to take action and to make sure something happens in practice.
Yeah. Emma Foodie.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for her statement, and want to put on record my thanks to those who work day in, day out to keep our streets and communities safe, undertaking work and activities that many of us may never hear about. Can the Home Secretary please provide the assurance that with this government, the police and security services will always have the powers and resources that they need to keep us safe?
My honourable friend is right to talk about the vital work the police and security services, intelligence services do. It is because we so strongly support them that we are now putting forward proposals to strengthen the law, to make sure that they do have the powers that they need at all stages, and so we support them to keep us safe.
Dr. Andrew Mason.
Deputy Speaker, we understand that the three individuals concerned entered the country illegally and then claimed asylum. Does the Home Secretary agree that this country is particularly attractive to those who wish to claim asylum, because it is relatively easy to be successful in that endeavour compared with, for example, France? So it makes sense to claim asylum here. Does she attribute any of that to the Human Rights Act? And if so, how does she plan to amend it? And does she have cause for concern that those who are tasked with making decisions sometimes are guilty of overzealous application of the law in respect of asylum?
Well, the three individuals that he referred to entered the UK between 2016 and 2022 and were granted asylum. I can tell him that grant rates for asylum have fallen in the last year and returns of failed asylum seekers have increased. We are also strengthening our border security with counter-terrorism powers and also strengthening the checks around criminality across the immigration and asylum system.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Home Secretary for her statement and also the Security Minister for his written statement last week on the work of the Defending Democracy Task Force. As she'll be aware, the Human Rights Committee are currently conducting a inquiry into transnational repression, which I'm sure she'll look at our findings very carefully. Can I ask whether the State Threats Joint Unit will be working on transnational repression and bringing together cross-party approach so that we can tackle this important issue?
My honourable friend raises an important point. I know the inquiry that his committee is pursuing is very important, and the Security Minister will indeed be giving evidence to that inquiry about the work being done on transnational repression, including on the work by the Defending Democracy Task Force. The Joint State Threats Unit is looking at a wide range of issues about how we tackle the kinds of threats that we face across the country.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Speaker, as President Trump seeks to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran, can I ask the Home Secretary whether she could work with Five Eyes partners, indeed senior ministers across government, working with the National Security Council and the National Security Advisor team in the White House to ensure that any nuclear deal is comprehensive, that doesn't exclude ensuring that Iran is not able to continue to work in proxy form, whether through criminal gangs or through other states, in order that we don't have sanctions lifted without further action in areas that she's discussed today.
The honourable member makes an extremely important point. It's essential that Iran is prevented from developing any further nuclear threat, and that is why the US-led talks are so important. We support them very strongly. He is also right that this needs to be a comprehensive approach, and it's something that that is an approach we also agree with across the Five Eyes partners.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I associate myself with the praise for our intelligence, police and security services. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement about the combination of international cooperation and robust action at home, and as also set out previously by the Security Minister. It's critically important, of course, when tackling alleged acts of direct threat to life and property. But does she agree with me that measures such as the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme are really important, because we are now seeing increasingly actions by organised criminal gangs and other groups which are an insidious force in our country, and we must deter other states and organisations from the nefarious actions that they're taking.
My honourable friend is right. We are increasingly seeing a pattern where foreign state organisations end up also using criminal proxies to pursue malign activity. And that is why we have to link up the work around serious and organised crime with work around counter-terrorism, with work around state threats. It's combining the different hybrid threats that we now face, which is why the new national security strategy is so important.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary, in a statement, said the Iranian regime poses an unacceptable threat to our domestic security, which cannot continue. Yet we know that Iranians make up the third largest group of illegal migrants crossing the Channel. So does the Home Secretary agree with me that any Iranians crossing the Channel should be detained and deported and not allowed to claim asylum?
Yeah.
Well, I would say to the honourable member that I think the system that we inherited from the previous government, including a government that he was at different times a part of, was not strong enough. and that border security needs to be treated as a national security issue. It hasn't been for far too long. That's why we're introducing counter-terrorism style powers as part of our border security response. I'm really sorry that he and his party chose to vote against those counter-terrorism powers repeatedly, because we do need those counter-terrorism powers introduced. It's why we're also strengthening the security and criminality checks across the asylum and immigration system, because we need to make sure that we're doing everything possible to keep our country safe.
David Pinter-Duchinsky.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to start by welcoming the measures my right honourable friend has announced today, and join her in paying tribute to the security services and thank them for keeping us safe. The actions of the last few days underline the profound threat Iran poses to our country. Many of the Iranian community in my constituency in Hendon live in fear of transnational repression. Could my right honourable friend say a bit more about what the government's doing to protect our Iranian community and all those who live in fear of transnational repression, so that they can live lives in freedom in Britain?
Well, my honourable friend is right that transnational repression has become a growing threat and challenge, not just from Iran, but from other countries as well. The Security Minister provided an update to the House just last week on the further actions that we are taking, including further support for those who are being targeted and further advice and guidance as well for those who face threats. And those are the kinds of threats as well that our police and security service are particularly vigilant towards, to ensure that everyone in our country can feel confident they will be kept safe.
David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Home Secretary explain why the British envoy in Tehran was summoned by the Iranian authorities at the weekend? And more importantly, does this not signal a complete disconnect from reality on the part of the Iranian state?
Well, I think the honourable member is right to raise this. We have made extremely clear our views to the Iranian regime about the unacceptability of state-backed threats on our soil, including the summoning of the Iranian ambassador to the UK, but also including the further measures, not just in the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, but in also the further measures we are now going to take forward in response to Jonathan Hall's report. But it is immensely important that the Iranian regime hears the points that we are making and that we are raising, and understands our determination to protect the security of those on UK soil.
Chris Fins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Home Secretary for her statement today and the work that she and Ministers have done on this really important issue. Can I once again also put on record my thanks, and thanks to the people of Harlow for the work that the police and the security service do to keep us all safe. And does she agree with me that as methods of these state-backed agents change and adapt, we too need to change and adapt? I'm thinking particularly, as my right honourable friend from Dover said, with regards to intelligence gathering, and that the Jonathan Hall report will be an important part of that.
Honourable friend is right. The Jonathan Hall report identifies a series of areas where we have long-standing counter-terrorism powers, but they go further than the kinds of powers that we have around state-backed threats. That might be something as simple as the power for the police to set a cordon up around the target of a potential terrorist incident. They should have those same abilities to do that about a potential target for a state threat incident. So we will be looking to take forward those powers, but in order to be able to most effectively use those powers, we also need the best intelligence gathering. We already have the best security intelligence agencies in the world. They need to be able to work ever more strongly with international partners too.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for her words, and strong words and determined words and actions as well. We appreciate that. And firstly, I offer my thanks to the Counter-Terrorism Unit for their work with this case. I know that this is the tip of the iceberg of the work that is carried out on scene by us to keep us all safe across this great United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The rest of these three asylum seekers will naturally highlight the failings in the system. And I say this regardless of whatever party was in power at the various times through that journey. What assurances will the Secretary of State and this government take regarding the influx of young single men claiming asylum who seem empowered to declare war against this nation that has fed and clothed them for so many years? And how do we assure our British public my British public, that the end has come to housing these foreign nationals who hate this nation and all that it stands for?
Secretary.
Well, the honourable member is right to pay tribute to the police and security intelligence services, and he will know more than many in this House the nature, the complexity, the wide range of different kinds of threats our agencies have had to deal with through the years. They continue to need to deal with issues around terrorist threats, from Islamist extremism to far-right extremism. They have, of course, had to deal over very many years with threats around Northern Ireland, terror threats as well, and they have to deal with the changing patterns around state threats and the different forms that those threats can take, the way in which those interact with criminality as well. This government has made clear we see border security as part of national security. It's something the Prime Minister said in his speech to Interpol before Christmas, and it's why we are strengthening the counter-terrorism style powers that we are using and bringing forward through this House, but also strengthening that international cooperation. It's why we held the first ever international summit on organised immigration crime, because we see that as a national security issue too.
And that concludes the statement. And before we move on to the next statement, I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over.